we've been doing movie nights for
years.
So Gen Xer and
a Gen Z. Random weird moments that the two of us have experienced, and there are a lot of those.
And he crashes them.
As you do.
It's like, I'm just sitting there and I'm like, where did this come from? Why are we singing?
I mean, you're not going to learn anything about the movies listening to us talk. This is the Argo City Podcast. Film, conventions, and fan life with Maddie and Matthew. Okay, so this week it is the movie box of doom. And you've got some stuff in front of you there.
Oh, actually, yeah, this wasn't here a minute ago.
So, what are you looking at?
That is, okay, so I'm looking at a Marvel comic with Spider-Man apparently being the target. That's two heroes I would have never expected to see together.
Well, see, that's the thing. Right there, be careful with that. Be extremely careful with that.
Okay.
What you're holding is the first appearance of the Punisher.
Really?
The very first appearance. Yes.
Why Spider-Man?
As a Spider-Man villain.
Oh, I always love looking at the ads in these. Huh.
Take a look at the front of that again, though. Right there.
Oh, you have it signed.
That's right.
Who's the signature by?
That is Jerry Conway. He's the person who created the Punisher.
Oh.
And the very first Akron Comic-Con, they brought him in, and his line was not nearly as long as it should have been. Jerry Conway did lots of stuff. You met him at a later Akron Comic-Con, actually. I introduced you. Well, that time around, I had him sign some Dracula stuff that he'd written, because that's what you'd read.
Is that where I got my little card thing? Like the little card that someone signed?
That might be.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Actually, I think that was Day of the Dead, actually.
So, yeah. Jerry looked at that. It's funny how I got that. For a while there, Grandma was doing a lot of eBaying and flipping and stuff.
Really?
And she got a bunch of comics. She's like, I don't want to go through all of these. She's like, just give them to Matt. So, in that stack, this was in there.
Really?
Somebody knew what they were doing, too, because they had one of the reprints of it. Like, the original and one of the reprints. And they were double bagged. So, reprints on the back, the originals in the front. So, they've got one to read and one to collect. They also had Death of Gwen Stacy.
That's one of the ones that I remember you telling me a lot about that when we were watching through the original Spider-Man trilogy.
Yeah, so those two are actually valuable. In fact, it's possible I decreased the value by getting them signed. It's also possible I increased it.
That's weird. Jerry
looked at me and was like, these comics are worth more now than what I was paid to write them.
That's actually really funny. If you can't tell, this week's movie was The Punisher.
But the question is...
Which one?
Which one?
Because as I was made aware afterwards, apparently there were 3 of these movies?
Yes. So
we watched the one that was like in the middle, right?
Yes. We're talking about the 2004 one, 2003 one, something like that, with Thomas Jane and John Travolta. This is the only one that matters. This is the good one.
Mm-hmm. I can definitely agree with that. This was a pretty interesting movie.
And even, you're not really familiar with the Punisher. I mean, you've been around the edges of comic done long enough to recognize the skull, but that's about it.
I recognize the character. I recognize that you used to have a shirt with it, but aside from that, I know essentially nothing about this character. So that was definitely a bit of a learning curve there.
It is, and this is not necessarily a great movie for that learning curve, because it changes things a little bit. I mean, aside from the fact that the Punisher is based in New York like the rest of Marvel, it's funny, at one point he says to his wife, I'm ready to have another one. And I'm like, yeah, you're supposed to have another one. You're supposed to have a boy and a girl.
Oh, no.
And the if you don't know the story of the Punisher, his wife and child were
Killed!
yes, in a senseless. Now in the comics, it's a senseless shootout in Central Park between two rival gangs. This goes further.
No, legitimately, like, that was one of the things that really threw me off in the beginning, because I thought, like, we were just going to be kind of, like, following this family, because as we've mentioned before, I have no idea about anything in this particular genre.
But I mean, that's just, it's like a movie rule. You don't kill kids.
Exactly, and that's why it, like, threw me off so much. Like,
It-
I had gotten a bit attached to that family.
And it's kind of like all bets are off.
Yeah, I mean, I was thrown off when they murdered the entire family, but literally, we were watching them as they were attempting to escape, and their escape was futile. We watched them as they, like, were trying to huddle their way over to the van. We watched the car chase with the boat, and then we watched them struggle to get out of the car when it flipped over, and I was, like, rooting for them, but it was all for nothing. And that's what really threw me for a loop. It was literally pointless.
It is such a nihilistic, dire moment. It is such. I don't usually watch that part of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, I start the movie after we get that basic origin, and he is packing up the guns. I start up at the words
At the kooky doctors.
at go with God, and Punisher looking back and saying, God's gonna sit this one out.
Yeah. I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I could have done without that whole, like, I mean, even when we were starting off, I was so confused with that whole, like, mob boss scene. I had no idea what was happening.
You don't have the context that he's a bad guy, or you don't have enough context that
Yeah,
he's a bad guy,
I
that they're
didn't know.
running guns, they're running drugs, they're washing money.
And, like, I only really started to kind of catch on right around the time the family came into play. So, honestly, I mean, I get, like, the reason, like, you killed them, but I could have done with that in, like, a flashback rather than a, like, full-on showing scene.
I mean, yes, but
I feel
at
like
the
it was a
same
waste of
time... Well, and you know what? That's interesting you point that out, because in the other two movies, it's a flashback. They don't go full-on origin for half the movie, which it's my beef with a lot of these superhero movies. They feel like they have to do half the movie. You go back to Spider-Man, half the movie is origin. You go back to Superman in 1979, half the movie is origin story. I don't need it. I know it. And I realize the Punisher might not be quite as familiar.
Yeah.
Although, see, in the 90s, late 80s, the Punisher is one of the biggest selling books, biggest heroes out there. I cannot tell you how important this character was at that point. Marvel's kind of ashamed of him, though, because they just don't know what to do with him, especially since it's out of fashion.
Yeah, and I mean, he's all kind of like guns blazing rather than like using mystical powers and crap.
But he's always been that way.
But honestly, when you were showing me the trailers for the other movies, and I kind of had like this weird take with it, where I honestly think it'd be more interesting to see him hunt down the guilty rather than just this particular movie just following him as he takes revenge on the mob boss that killed his family and stuff. I think I would have enjoyed him just hunting people down better.
It might work better if the bad guys are generic.
Yeah.
But you know, that's the thing with this film. And see, I get that criticism, but at the same time, that's what makes this better than the other two. They give the bad guys personality.
That's
they give them
true.
a lot of characterization. They spend a lot of time making them more than just generic cardboard cutouts. And John Travolta, his best destiny, I say it every time, his best destiny is to be a bad guy. I love John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. I love John Travolta in Broken Arrow. I love John Travolta in this. He is perfect as a bad guy. It's no holds barred. He is unleashed.
I'm gonna kind of jump back there to what you were saying a bit earlier. the whole idea of these characters being so characterized, it's something that I also really enjoyed, particularly with the roommates. They were my favorite thing throughout this entire film because they're just like chilling, they're cooking, they're just hanging out. As later on, when the walls come down, they don't even mention it. They just walk through a hole in the wall, and I'm like, cool, full on sleepover. This is great.
It is so smart because what they're doing here, that second half is, it's kind of doing its own take on a story arc called Welcome Home, Frank. And that was Marvel's attempt to kind of reestablish the Punisher, put it in a mature label so that they could be a little bit more violent and use bad words and really dire situations. So they're adapting a lot of that, and yeah, man, it's smart because you have so many people you can latch onto. You have so much of a cast.
Literally, I immediately latched onto the overweight guy.
To Bumpo. Mr.
Yes.
Bumpo.
I loved him. He barely spoke in the whole thing, but him just like pretending to sing the opera, with him making like snacks, especially even with him dragging away the other friends so that the two quote unquote lovebirds unquote could have a minute together. He was amazing throughout. He was always making me laugh. I was watching him in the background, and I loved just watching him. He was so much fun.
He was a brilliant actor too. That's John Pinay, and he was a comedian.
That's probably why I liked him so much, because he seemed so happy.
He is. I'll have to dig up the episode of Alf that he shows up in.
He shows up in Alf?
He does.
Oh my god.
But he's most famous for like his shtick was, you're such a great crowd. I wish I could take you to a buffet. I love buffets. The problem is, and he would do this joke. This is like a standard in his set. Like I'll be there, and after a while, like the restaurant manager will come out and look at me and is like, "You go now. What? You've been here 4 hours."
No, literally, like the restaurant is just telling him to go to the buffet.
And I laughed so hard at that because that's happened to me.
What?
Oh yeah, see, yeah. You're too young to remember the magical place that we called Ponderosa.
Yeah, I have no idea what that
Ponderosa was a steakhouse. And they had a buffet. So you'd order a steak, and then you'd just feed off the buffet and take the steak home for the next day. Or sometimes, like once or twice a year, they do all-you-can-eat steak.
So it's like reversed then.
Oh, so... like me and my friends would go there, and I remember there was one night that we had a hard time getting home because we'd eaten so much steak. It was like 12 ribeyes.
Oh my god!
And
holy crap! Were you guys okay?
I had to stop and park for a minute.
Oh my goodness!
But the other thing we would do is we would go there and we would game.
What do you mean, like game? Like video game?
I would bring a role-playing game with me.
I wanted to.
A lot of times it would be like a Star Trek one, because that was the one that everybody seemed to latch on to. And we'd set up at a table, out in the corner. We'd keep going back to the buffet, and we would just game and eat and game and eat, and then there were a couple times we got kicked out, and the problem is I wasn't finished with the game yet, so we had to go next door to Taco Bell and finish up.
That is such a you thing to do, though.
So, that is John Pinay. That's Mr. Bumpo, and like I said, he's gone now, and but he was a brilliant comedian, so I understand why you like him. The girl actually, you won't recognize her, but she was in X-Men.
Oh?
Yes.
Like which one? The movie or the
movie?
Cartoon?
The movie. And when we'll get around to going to at least X-Men 2, but you're still not going to recognize her because she's blue.
The shapeshifter?
Yes.
I was going to say, I thought, what's the actress's name?
Yeah, Katniss takes over later.
I was going to say, I knew the actress played her because I remember seeing like a clip of an interview.
Yeah, Jennifer Lawrence takes over after they reboot it with after they try and reboot it with a younger cast.
Right. Okay.
But before that, it's Rebecca
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, I can go either way with Jennifer Lawrence. Sometimes I don't generally like her as an actress, but she's good. She's good in her roles. She's just not a good person.
But before her, it was this girl. And again, Fox. Fox was making this movie. Fox is making the movie. So she's got Marvel cred.
Yeah, definitely, I suppose.
And man, she's good in this.
She's pretty good.
Everything about this, it's a better movie than The Punisher should be. That's the thing. It's a smarter movie than The Punisher should be.
Can I just jump on one more character before we go off on that tangent again? I love the mob boss's wife. She is so much fun. Like anybody.
The mob boss's wife who orders the entire family killed.
You have to let me explain first. Anybody who is like around my age, general Gen Z, has been in the depths of like reading about like. Honestly, I just say the word fan fiction and everyone's going to know what I'm talking about here. Everybody around my age has been in those depths. I have been in those depths. There is no exception. So, like, just kind of getting to see that she is, like, she's cocky. She's just, like, going on her own roll. She is just hanging out. Her death was freaking tragic. But seriously, I loved kind of just getting to watch her. Just, I don't know. There's just something about that just seems so cool to me.
It's an interesting person to latch on to because it's...
She's a horrible person, but I mean... She was an interesting character to watch.
There aren't a lot of great people in here, but... and that's the thing. The Punisher's not supposed to... They say it outright. You are not a nice man.
Yeah. And even just, like, jumping on this, the humor in this movie has been... It was amazing. Like, they pulled it out at the most random moments. Like, my favorite thing that happened towards the end when he's about to kill his best friend, you have too much furniture for me to be doing this, as he's kicking the furniture around. And it's moments like that where you don't expect it, but it manages to bring up the mood from that really, like, well, down in the dumps, dark murder, blood, gore, guns a-blazing, bang, bang, bang kind of stuff. That really was cool for me.
That's why I keep coming back to this is such a smart movie, and it's smarter than the material deserves. I've got a volume of Essential Punisher here.
That's a big book.
Yeah, and that's not even getting into like the regular series. Punisher started showing up first as a Spider-Man villain, and then
Daredevil.
Yeah, Marvel's all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, he's popular. So they'd put him in his own magazines, and eventually he got his own book. And yes, Daredevil actually has a relationship with the Punisher.
Really?
Daredevil wants the Punisher to not be the Punisher.
Okay.
And the Punisher thinks that Daredevil is naive.
What do you mean naive?
He thinks you shouldn't be letting these guys go. You shouldn't be letting these guys live. You shouldn't be putting them in jail. You should be putting them in the ground.
Oh.
They're very much played as two sides of the same coin.
No, that's actually a really interesting take on it.
The second season of Netflix's Daredevil series is Daredevil versus Punisher.
Really?
Really is. We haven't even talked about that. That is the single best of all the Punisher arcs. I've got a couple of those in the rack right next to you as well, and that's about where I came in, starting to read the character. It's good stuff. It's
Is he riding on a camel?
Yes, because that one's a special issue with him in the outback in Australia.
Of course, they would do something like that.
Well, that's the thing because the Punisher was the Punisher gained such popularity. And especially during the Dark Ages of comics, and that's like this early 90s period we call the Dark Ages, everybody had big guns and lots of bullets and lasers and stuff like that. And so the Punisher fit perfectly. And it got less grounded and got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so you kept seeing him in stuff and teaming up with people. That's one of the things this story, like the story that this movie is based on, is there to, let's get away from that. Let's ground it again. Let's make him just a guy who is obsessed and on his own mission. Because that's the thing. The Punisher Okay, so he got his revenge in this movie, but the thing is, he doesn't stop. It's not enough to just kill the gangsters that killed his family.
He has to stop other people from suffering that same fate.
He's got to kill all the gangsters. He is Batman in a lot of ways. He's driven by that same vengeance.
Except for he finishes the job.
Yes, Batman doesn't want to kill, and the Punisher wants to do nothing but kill. And there's been some people have different takes on this.
What do you mean?
I remember one storyline where somebody confronts him and says, here's the thing, the truth is, you're not just doing this for revenge. You kill because you like it.
Oh.
And you use your family
as an
excuse to do something awful.
Oh, I don't like that.
I don't think I do either. I don't like that take on it.
I don't like that. No, I don't like that.
The Punisher has his issues with God as well. We saw that he's been a soldier. We saw that he's been a cop.
Yeah, he had the dog tags.
They don't mention he also spent time in seminary.
What's that?
He's trained to be a priest.
Oh.
And
That
he's
is such a thing to do, to make the murderous character trained to be a priest.
Well, yeah, but it's part of his psychology, because it's, why did God let this happen? And that's something that we have to wrestle with. For those of us who are religious, yeah, we have to wrestle with, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? Why is the world like this? Why can't he intervene? Now, I could go through and give you some theological reasons, and I could quote Chesterton and Lewis and Spurgeon, and we don't need to do that right now. Yeah. But feel free to email me if you're really interested.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, you say that, but I've done Bible studies on comic book characters.
Yeah, you've written so many of them at this point.
I've done Bible studies on Lilo and Stitch, so you know what.
Moving on.
Actually, though, that's something that we get a little bit more into here. I'm pulling out. Let's talk about some of the other ones, because I have a weird theory.
Okay.
So we watched technically the second movie, 2004.
What do you mean technically?
Well, it's the second one released.
Oh, okay.
The 1989 movie with Dolph Lundgren, and Louis Gossett Jr. Louis Gossett Jr. gives us such a great performance here, by the way. That's the black detective who's talking about, I put a pin every time he kills somebody on my map.
And all he has for it is a couple of bullets and a lot of pins.
Yeah. And then afterwards they did another one of these called Punisher Warzone, named after one of the comic books.
Yeah.
All right, so
I hated that trailer. It was so choppy.
My theory is, watch them out of order. Watch the one that we watched tonight. Watch this one first.
Oh, and then you hit like the storytelling and stuff.
Then we hit 1989. Let's say that happens 5 years later.
Okay.
Because 1989's Punisher, it specifically says Castle's been missing and on a rampage for 5 years. It says it. Now, there's an African American gentleman that was his partner in the first part of our movie tonight. He's the one who's like throwing the party for him. We see him at the very beginning, the part that I don't watch most of the time. So he's like, "What am I going to do without you?" And Castle says, "Get a girlfriend."
Yeah, once again, bring me back to how much I love that humor. But anyways. So,
let's say that guy is Louis Gossett Jr. in the 1989 one. A big part of this movie is Gossett has been searching for him.
Okay.
He wants to find Frank. He wants to heal him. He wants to... Frank's like... He sees Frank as crazy. All right, you killed 1,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, I would think you'd be kind of crazy too.
He wants to find Frank and get him help.
Oh.
He's been searching for him for 5 years. That's the B plot of this movie, by the way. That's the subplot.
Okay.
But man, it's good. So let's say that he's that partner from our movie tonight, and that this takes place 5 years later. Frank is still killing. He's lost that skull shirt. That explains why it's not there. It's just, it vanished. Okay, I don't know what happened to it. He's living in the sewers.
Oh.
He's praying to God, God, why is this happening? Why do the evil people continue to get their way when the innocent are
down?
Right. Or have you said, where's justice, God? Or have you said, here's justice? Here's punishment in me? I mean, that's how this movie opens. With him in the middle of a sewer, back to the camera, just trying, and that's the overdub.
Yeah.
So, also in this story, yeah, the mob's in it, but the story is really about the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza.
So where does this one movie particularly take place then? Because
New York.
Why is the Yakuza in New York?
The Punisher's been decimating the New York mobs, so they think it's time to move in.
Oh, so they think that they can go in and take power.
Right. So you have this weird, unusual villain. That's sequel material. The first movie, you want him fighting his traditional enemies. The second one's where you can get a little weird. And so that's why this feels more like a sequel. This would make an excellent sequel to our first movie. And then you throw Warzone in at the end. He's kind of becoming more human. He's got some allies. He's built up some infrastructure. That's how I think you should watch it. 2, 1, 3. And then you actually have a trilogy. Now, you have to ignore the fact that the origin story, which the other two tell kind of flashback, you have to ignore that they don't match. But it's still the same basic story. Warzone is okay. But the villains are cartoon characters. And they kill it and they ruin it for me, which is a shame because they finally get like his archenemy, his Lex Luthor, his Joker.
Who's his archenemy?
It's a gangster called Jigsaw. Jigsaw has that name because he used to be a very a handsome, total Chad.
Okay. And
the Punisher threw him through a plate glass window.
And
there wasn't enough of his face left to fix right.
Oh, God.
So his face kind of looks...
I gotta look up a picture of this. Hang on. Keep talking. I'm looking up a picture of this.
Unfortunately, your chair is blocking my access to my comic book racks. Otherwise, I'd grab you Circle of Blood and show you.
Sure.
But the problem is, Jigsaw is played like a...
Oh, that's horrifying.
It is, but that's
Oh, my God.
That's exactly what you're going to get from the Punisher.
Holy crap. Oh, I hate it so much. I hate this so much. It almost reminds me... Oh, goodness. Of what is its name? I think he's a Batman villain.
Two-Face?
I don't think it was Two-Face. I can't remember the name of it. Maybe it was Two-Face? I don't think it was Two-Face. I don't know. I'm sure I'll remember later and text you about it.
So, I finally get him. And he's so bad. And that's just why Warzone's kind of a disappointment for me. Mm-hmm. Warzone also opens with he makes a mistake and he accidentally kills a cop who's pretending to be a gangster. Oh. I really, really don't like that. And it's the subplot of the movie where he's trying to make it up for their family. Yeah,
I would almost think he would be investigating every little thing before he does that. I feel like if anything, he would be more aware of the fact that there is a cop in there. I mean, even if he was a cop or stuff like that, I feel like even being in that profession, he'd be able to recognize like subtle signs.
Yeah, that's the thing. It doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah. And then we also watched, you showed me a short afterwards called Laundry Day.
Dirty Laundry.
Which was, I was very confused when we started off. Because you you played the last trailer for like the second movie, and there was like, and then this showed up on YouTube one day, played it without any explanation, and I'm watching through this, and I'm just like, what?
And I think that's the best way to do it.
I'm sitting there as like he's not doing anything, and that's why I was getting a bit upset that he wasn't stepping in with like the possible rape going on, or like with the kid getting beat up. And
right, we see like, gangsters out, and gangsters with an A, and yeah, just causing chaos.
But he doesn't like do anything until
pimps beating the hose and hassling the local street kid, and it just builds, and it just builds.
And he's just sitting there doing his laundry.
And he's trying not to. He's trying to. I don't want to go back to this life, but yeah.
But, and then it just, like, ends with him, like, taking all of them out with the kid biting his leg. Good for him, by the way. But, like, and
with
then
a Jack Daniels bottle.
Yeah, and then just leaving the lighter there so that someone else can take their revenge if they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was kind of cool that he didn't do it himself.
That's the thing.
Like, he left it open.
They had a hard time figuring out. They've always had a hard time with the Punisher. Marvel's kind of ashamed of the Punisher at this point. They don't know what to do with them. But then again, Thomas Jane liked it, and he had a vision. His vision was different than the writers, and there was a hard time figuring out what to do with it, and so they went a different direction. He's always wanted to come back to it, and this was his bid. This was like, I'm going to make a short film, show you what my vision was. I'm still here. And the thing is...
Yeah, just good for him.
The thing is, the Punisher is supposed to be an older dude.
How
Punisher,
old?
well, he fought in Vietnam. That's his soldier stuff. So, when I was reading him, he should have been late 40s, early 50s.
Ugh, it's like going back to me reading those Batman comics. Ugh.
Yeah, but that's always been him. Now, we'd probably say Desert Storm now. I think that's probably why they need to move it up too. But he's always been an older guy. And he's always been Marvel's, this is just the common man. This is a guy with no powers in this world of...
As you mentioned before, he's our Batman from the series.
He really is. And this is also... It's a little harder for your generation, I think. I grew up... I was a kid in the 80s and a teenager in the 90s. The 80s is like... The 70s and 80s is like the heyday of the action movie. Mm-hmm. So one variety of the action movie, you can't see the air quotes that I'm making, but I assure you I'm making them, there's like the oversized Arnold Schwarzenegger hero action movie, or there's the revenge action movie. The Charles Bronson Death Wish movies. I don't watch them because I don't like... I rape's the trigger for me, so I can't watch too much of those. A lot of like the Death Wish movies can get that way, but the revenge movies, something horrible happens to this person,
and they go on a quest for revenge.
Right. I remember even watching like seeing some of the Death Wish ones as a kid and thinking, he's the Punisher. He even uses the same guns. It's a common genre for Gen Xers like me. It's not a common genre for you.
Yeah, I've grown up in like the era of like, I mean, when I specifically like, I want to say probably around 5 years ago or so, when I really started getting into like the whole Marvel scene and with all those movies and stuff, I was in the age of high-powered, bright costumes, all that kind of stuff. I grew up in that era.
Right, and the action movie was that in my era. And when I was growing up, this has taken place. And the fact that we're right around that 20-year bubble, that's why it's ending. Because it's just like for my father, it was the Western.
Yeah, and I remember I mentioned at the end of the movie that I think I said, and I quote, I wouldn't consider this a superhero movie because it's just not to me. It's not that whole genre that I've grown up with. It's not like that stuff. I see this more of like an action movie, like more of a, I guess, like action, not quite horror, but like there's a lot of that like
There's
There's a lot of that stuff, but
there's some
like maybe thriller.
squirmy parts, yeah.
Yeah, like an action thriller with like a hint of like mystery in it because we're trying to figure out like what's going on.
Well, and once the MCU got going properly, they could do that kind of stuff. Like Captain America, First Avenger. That's not a superhero movie. That's a war movie.
No, it's not. And that's kind of like, it's been so long since I've seen it.
And what I wanted for Black Widow, I wanted a James Bond movie. I wanted an espionage movie.
Oh my gosh, we wanted, like, I remember we were talking about it when the movie first came to theaters. Mm-hmm. I want a backstory. I want to see her training in the Red Room. I want to see her going on her first couple missions. I want to see all the glimpses that I've seen from pictures online in the comics. I want to see that. And
that's the beauty of the superhero genre. It can be all of those things.
But they chose not to!
At the beginning, Thor, the first Thor, is a fantasy movie. The first Thor made me I watched that and thought, why can't you give me a He-Man movie like this? Mm-hmm. So it can be done, and that's what this is doing. You're right. I think it's still in the same genre, but yeah, it's something different. There's actually, let me go back to Daredevil for a moment, because there's a Daredevil arc where Daredevil he's decided, all right, forget it. If I can't just clean the city up as a crime fighter, I'm the new Kingpin, okay? Everybody out.
Oh.
And at one point, he confronts the Punisher, and the Punisher is a little surprised. He's like, and Daredevil looks at him and says, "What? You think because you've got a logo on your chest that you get a pass?"
Oh, the grin that I just made. Oh, that's cool.
See, yeah, the whole Daredevil Punisher thing really is
it's really like
thing.
A yin and yang, like.
And it's one of the great things about it. In fact, I will point you over to this box.
Giant box sitting underneath a bunch of other boxes.
But this box is Daredevil and it's Punisher. Oh. They're both in the same box for that reason.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that those were in those boxes to begin with, but I didn't know that you put those in there for that reason.
Yeah, because they're just so similar.
Huh, that is really interesting.
So, yeah, that's the Punisher for tonight. You did see the Daredevil movie, too. And that's another Fox movie. It's been a while.
It has been a while. I don't really remember.
That may be something that we want to look at, maybe those two together. At some point, maybe we need to look at Daredevil Season 2. I don't like Season 1, I don't like Season 3, and I don't like the Punisher Netflix show.
Okay.
But Season 2 I like. And there's a new Daredevil TV show coming out.
Oh?
Maybe that's something we need to look at down the road. Do a Daredevil night, because Daredevil's in my top 5.
Yeah, I think we should definitely look into that later on.
All right, in the meantime, that is it for The Punisher. So we should be back next week with something else.
For the movie we love of Boom!
Assuming that we don't do a convention special or something like that.
Oh, that's true!
Because we're heading to ZipCon right now. For those of you in the future that will have already been there. By the time you hear this, we'll have already been there like months ago.
There might be a vlog from my part. There might not. I don't know.
There might be a vlog. There might be a podcast. But in any event, yes, okay. That's it for the movie Wheel of Doom tonight. Or
movie Box of Doom. They're two separate entities.
We will talk with you next week.
Bye!